You talked, Charlie, I think it was you that talked a bit about like the Mueller investigation.
Yeah.
I know you said it was like a waste of time, that kind of thing. I don't know, what makes you think it was a waste of time? Because it was about 30 indictments, a couple convictions. What specifically about it was a waste of time to you?
Okay,
You know, criminals were exposed.
No heckling, no heckling.
A court determined that criminals were exposed.
So do you know what was the basis of the original Russia intelligence investigation in the FBI?
Right, so from what I understand, my understanding was that the investigation was opened up to basically understand all the different ways that the Russian Federation has colluded with the US elections.
What was the piece of intelligence that began the surveillance or the spying, whatever you want to call it, of the Trump campaign?
No idea.
Okay,
but,
so
yeah.
it was a dossier
Right.
that was funded by the Democrat National Committee and the Hillary Clinton campaign, constructed by an opposition research firm called Fusion GPS. The dossier has been disproven and debunked to have so many inaccuracies and misleading facts and information. So that was put in front of a FISA judge. For those of you that don't know what a FISA judge is, that is giving permission for the United States government to surveil its own citizens. Now, there were 3 members of the Trump campaign that were former individuals at highest level of national security: Chris Christie, Rudy Giuliani, and Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. If the FBI was actually worried about Russia interference, they could have approached Chris Christie, who was a U.S. attorney, Mayor Giuliani, who was a former U.S. attorney, or Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who held the highest level of security clearance at the highest level of the military, saying, hey, we're worried about Russia interference in your election, we're worried about this Manafort guy. They never did that. Instead, they illegally surveilled and spied on the Trump campaign. So fast forward to April or May, where the actual Mueller investigation began. Andrew McCabe said it himself that his own internal workings towards getting eventual triggering of the Mueller investigation was based on the phony intelligence of Fusion GPS and based on this investigation. But you said 30 indictments. Let's break this down. Who is indicted? Paul Manafort is going to prison, not for Russia interference, my friend.
For tax fraud, yeah.
Right, tax fraud, wire fraud, and unregistered foreign lobbying for Ukraine, not even for Russia.
That's kind of Ukraine and Russia there. There's a little bit of a
war?
Well, there's a war. The war, yes, but like, keep in mind, yeah. I mean, saying that it's not, as a fair point, I think it's not to say that there isn't a connection.
I can see where you're coming from there.
Yeah,
I understand. There's a lot of cross-nationality there.
It's really tough to...
Sure.
Yeah.
So the second major indictment was George Papadopoulos, who lied under oath to the FBI. No Russian interference, no Russian connection. Okay. Also, the third, which is the most famous, is Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who, again, is indicted for a process crime and was indicted not for Russian collusion, but for not filling out his paperwork properly for the incoming president to become National Security Council advisor for unregistered foreign lobbying for the Turkish government. Okay? The fourth person who was indicted was the former attorney to the president, Michael Cohen, who we have on the record now lying at least 15 times to Congress under 2 separate testimonies. Now, he was not indicted for Russian collusion. He was not indicted for interference. He was indicted for taxi medallion fraud, tax fraud, and wire fraud. Now, those are the 4 Americans so far. There might be more. There probably won't be. Actually, the 5th. I'm sorry. There was a 5th. Obama's White House counsel was just recently indicted.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I'm sorry. In the last week, for unregistered foreign lobbying, taking a $4 million wire transfer that was laundered through Cyprus, for, again, with Paul Manafort essentially being the lawyer on file. His criminal trial is still pending. He has pleaded innocent. Those are the 5 major Americans. Now, you said 30 indictments. The rest of them are foreign Russian citizens that we could indict the entire country of Russia for essentially colluding against America, because every day the whole country is registered as a foreign adversary. So we just picked 25 people that were running Russian troll farms. Now, the 5 things that I told you could have been done with just telling the Department of Justice to do their job. Bob Mueller was not needed for $30 million creating a public assassination campaign against a president that was originally based on faulty intelligence. And so, I think you and I can agree that doing that for 2 years and exacerbating this Russian narrative, where Congressman Adam Schiff, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, now said there has yet to be released evidence that is material of Russian collusion against the Trump campaign. We're still waiting for what that is. There are 1,800 articles amongst the 4 major newspapers in America: USA Today, the Washington Post, the LA Times, and the New York Times. 1,800 articles alluding or directly connecting Donald Trump and the Trump campaign to committing treason with a foreign adversary. You got to ask the question, was it really necessary to hijack our whole public narrative for 2 years using $30 million of U.S. taxpayer to go after 5 people, none of which committed Russian collusion at all, instead had their own personal crimes that they committed? I believe it was a public assassination campaign that we paid for that now Donald Trump has rose up against and has triumphed over.